Can. Taoiseach, is Fine Gael and the Government still planning to introduce income-contingent loans for Irish third-level students? As you know, Peter Cassell's committee's report, Investing in National Ambition, set out 3 funding options for the third-level sector, including a predominantly state-funded system, a system of increased state funding with continuing registration fees, and its recommended funding option 3, increased state function with deferred payment of fees, but with income-contingent loans levied on graduates. Now, Minister Broughan informed my colleague Deputy Pringle and myself on April 5th last that his department are doing, and I quote, a technical evaluation of how income contingent loans would work, and he seems to have pushed ahead with this study without consulting the Education and Skills Committee of the Oireachtas. So when will the technical evaluation be published, and will it include a full cost-benefit analysis? But just before the Minister gave this reply last month, I chaired a meeting with the Union of Students in Ireland, attended by a cross-section of deputies from the House, and the union leaders Annie Hoey, Michael Kerrigan and their colleagues. They outlined powerful arguments against proceeding with students' income contingent loans. Internationally, Minister, where student loan schemes have been introduced, there are large-scale debt default rates. In Australia, outstanding debt is over $35 billion, with average student debt at almost $40,000 per graduate. In England, the poorest 40% of students will graduate with debts of nearly £44,000, and the financialisation or sale of student debt to the private sector is another reprehensible feature of the English system. Minister Broughan and indeed Minister McGrath and I represent a constituency, Minister, with districts where third-level access is below 20%, and in many parishes it's just 35% or under. And the introduction of student loans, of course, would have a further damaging impact on progression and access to third level, especially for important sectors of society, including students with a disability, lone parents, first-time mature students, part-time flexible learners, students from a farming background and students on grants. And one insuperable argument against income-contingent loans is the Irish tradition of emigration, the fact that we're an emigration nation, Minister, and the HEA indicated recently that 12% of graduates are emigrating for a first job, and the Union of Students estimates that nearly 4,000 additional graduates will emigrate to avoid repayment of large graduate loans. But would the Minister agree that one fundamental reason for not proceeding with ICLs is the huge ongoing cost to the state, as outlined at the Oireachtas Education and Skills Committee on Tuesday last by Dr Charles Larkin of TCD and Dr Shane Corbett of DCU? They oppose ICLs and characterise them as a very risky course of action for the Exchequer, with complex legislative set-up, administration and loan recovery systems, which will cost the state $10 billion over the first 10 years. So is Fine Gael, Minister Taoiseach, still determined to introduce income contingent loans, given your party's opposition to treating third-level education as a critical public good in the 2016 general election? And your partners, Fianna Fáil, of course, are sitting on the fence on this one, although 2017, as you know, is the 50th anniversary, when the great Donogh O'Malley introduced free second-level education. Thanks, Can.
Thank you very much.
Well, Deputy, as you said, the Government and indeed my party emphasise the importance of higher education. It is a central part of our plan as a government to support a strong economy and to deliver a fair society. And the package of measures that were announced for the sector in the budget reflects this priority, and that of course will help all students. And just to recap, we are providing an initial investment of £36.5 million in the sector this year and £160 million over the next 3 years. And it is the first significant investment in the sector for 9 years. And because of the improving economy, we're in a position to do that, and Minister Broughan has made it very clear that he intends to continue that support. It's the first significant investment, as I've said, in 9 years, a period in which state investment in higher education fell by 33%, £463 million. We are keeping pace now with the demographic increases, and there's also targeted initiatives in priority areas, and particular trying to ensure that there's more focus on research and flexible learning, and dealing with thousands of students are benefiting from these initiatives. There's a multi-year spending plan for the sector, and also we want to make sure that we have a sustainable system of funding going forward. Now, as you know, in 2016, Minister Broughan published the Cassell's report, and as committed to in the programme for government, the report is, as you rightly say, currently with the Oireachtas Committee. Minister Broughan has said this is an area where it would be preferable to have broad political consensus, and he is working to build that consensus here. The Oireachtas Committee are looking at that option that you've mentioned, as well as other options. The consultation paper on the introduction of the employer exchequer mechanism that was published in March, that stated that technical work will be undertaken on an income-contingent student loan scheme by an interdepartmental group in order to inform future policy options, including in light of the recommendations that will come from the Oireachtas Committee on Education and Skills. That work is of an administrative and technical nature, and that will ensure that the Department is in a position to respond once the Education Committee has completed its work and published its own recommendations. So these issues are as I say, they're under ongoing consideration by the Department. The Minister will examine the final report and is also doing some background work. So no decision has been taken in relation to this, but these are issues that are being examined and further work being completed in order to ensure we have all of the information that we need in relation to it.
Thank you, Tánaiste. Deputy Broughan.
Thanks, Ken. Well, of course, I welcome the additional €38.5 million in the 2017 budget, and also the promise of €160 million over the next 3 budgets, and indeed the proposal, I think, to increase the National Training Fund levy from 0.7% to 1% in forthcoming budgets. But it still needs, I think, Minister, a fundamental and early decision on this, and you haven't replied to a central question of whether the evaluation report, when it will be produced, is there an implementation plan going forward on what I regard to be a very regressive proposal. And of course it was your own government and the previous Fianna Fáil government that slashed third level funding from nearly £1.5 billion down to under £1 billion over the last 8 or 9 years. But if you do proceed with this, you might as well tear up the National Plan for Equity of Access to Higher Education 2015 to 2018, and with 45% of our workforce now graduates, and education playing a primary role in Ireland's growth and recovery since the early 1990s, shouldn't the government look positively to the long-term earning power and taxes of graduates to fund a free third-level system, rather than embarking on a regressive, unwieldy, dangerous system of student loans, and following, in fact, in this case, the good example of Scotland, Germany and France? Thanks, Cam.
Well, I've no doubt these issues will be considered very carefully in terms of having an equitable approach and making sure that all of our community can benefit from higher education. And let me just point out a couple of facts in relation to the equity issue. Over 3,000 students from disadvantaged groups would benefit from the additional package of £8.5 million to support more disadvantaged students, including lone parents, travellers, to attend a higher level. This includes the introduction of the full maintenance grant that is worth almost £6,000 from September 17 for 1,100 postgraduate students in the lowest income category. So that initiative, for example, is absolutely targeted to deal with the equity issues which you rightly raise. I've also talked about the other initiatives to support the New Frontiers research programme, for example, and the work that has been done to cover the increasing enrolments. So there is also the provision for expansion in apprenticeships and so on. So there's quite a number of issues, as well as the point that you make in relation to grants. There's quite another series of actions that have been taken to support equity in terms of access to education.
Deputy Eamon Ryan, please.